women and 6 children were tragically killed on March 26, 2018. At 90 miles an hour, Jennifer Hart plunged her 6 adopted children and her wife, Sara Hart, over a 100-foot cliff out here in California. Friends of this couple would find this super out of character. If they could, friends would declare that Jennifer and Sara Hart didn't do this. They would swear you had the wrong people. Like, no way. Not them. No. They were loving and giving. One of their family friends to this day declared the children that were in that car and plunged to their death were actually seen to be joyful and well-adjusted. Well, today isn't story time, it's testimony time. I was also a foster child in the system and ended up being adopted myself. And today, I'm gonna talk to you more about that and the hellish nightmare that it put me through in my childhood. Unfortunately, I can say with confidence, after my adoption, I didn't quite find my happily ever after either. Get over on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We are live now. We are small, but we are mighty. And it's really important that we get as much support as possible to start working with different organizations and help us with the mission to help others. So go ahead and hit that like button. I'll wait. You did it? All right, let's go.
This is my time, my day, my hour. This is my time, my day, my hour. This is my time, my day, my
Biggest takeaway today: the exploitation of children being used in a harmful manner and exploited on social media to paint the perfect family photo. This is a call to action. I'm gonna expose it right here in this story. Out the gate, red flag number 1. Foster parents, adopted parents, and really any kind of parent that is exploiting their children on the internet for heroic material, making news of achievement. Look at this. Jody Hildebrandt, Ruby Frankie, Chris Watts. If that's happening, you better look into it deeper. Let's get into this. Jennifer Jean Hart and Sarah Margaret Hart were from South Dakota. The two met when they were in school in Northern State University in Aberdeen. Sarah earned her degree in special education, but Jen never graduated. During this time, the two women had 2 things in common. Keeping their relationship a secret was number 1 for them. And you'll learn as time goes on, protecting that relationship seemed to be their highest motive above anything else. And that's really all you need to know. That each woman were really just kind of out for self. Following the first point, the second thing they had in common was they wanted to be involved with children. I already feel like this looks pretty bad. You got 2 selfish women that want to involve themselves with children. Okay, let's keep going. In 2004, the couple moved to Minnesota. There, they chose to come out about their relationship together. Jennifer in particular took to Facebook, and she was pretty upset by this point. She said the Midwestern mindset was relentlessly unforgiving and unaccepting. And she claimed that she lost friends over the matter, that she wanted to be with a woman. So the couple ended up later down the road in 2009 going out to Connecticut, where it's like more accepted to get married to the same sex, and they married one another. You know, that's what they wanted. But a lot more is gonna happen before we get to 2009. Let's just say at this point, a lot of people kind of looked into Jen and Sarah's relationship like it was starting from the very beginning, very heroic. But what I see is nothing special. Sure, they might have been an amazing and beautiful couple to people that would eventually become their friend later down the road. But to be honest, both women were sinners and normal people like the rest of us. Like those of us that have lost friends because they don't support what we're doing, or maybe we're doing something in our lives that we feel is best for us. And, you know, not everybody's going to be on board with that. But there's nothing, in my opinion, that's super heroic about Jennifer and Sarah's story up to this point. In fact, Jennifer was pretty aggressive, and she was an extrovert, and she had a history of doing some shady stuff. Back in college, Jennifer ended up getting arrested for stealing a pair of running shoes. And while she was at it, she kind of admits, well, yeah, I've been stealing, and from the movie theater as well. Just a little jab there. That's Jennifer. Now, the two women would end up working together at a store. It was called Hertzberger's. And there, Jennifer complained to a coworker that she didn't like the mannequin was sexist because it had nipples. Let's keep going. She takes a saw and she goes to town and she saws off the nipples off the mannequin because it offended her. All right, that's Jennifer. That's who we're dealing with the whole story. Somebody that just is drowning within herself, feeling like her choice in life to be attracted to a woman makes everything around her a magnet for enemy stance. She was living in defense. And I don't believe through this story we'll ever see that goes away. But we will discover that she found a way out of living in her own head through the fantasy world of social media. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, Sara, on the other hand, was also really highly sensitive, but instead of being like Jen, she was more tucked in. She would tuck her tail between her legs, and she was the kind of person that would break at sensitivity. She would just cry. And allegedly, she had estranged herself pretty early into the relationship with Jen from her own father, which I think is very interesting. She moved away from a man to get closer to a woman. And not that I'm judging, but Sara glued herself to Jennifer, and Jennifer was really taken the lead. So at this point, I just don't see anything that's out of the norm, heroic or amazing with these two women. But I believe I see a pattern of them wanting to be. I think they're wanting, like any one of us, to pursue a life where they can make a difference somehow. They want to use what they've learned and take it to another level, except by their choices, I'm not feeling like they've learned anything. In fact, I'm worried because I'm seeing two unhealed women coming together in defense, taking it out in opposite ways, and running from the healing. That's just what I see. The next chapter here, I just can't with these women. Two unhealed women, young, they're in their 20s, and they decide that they want to share the common ground of working with children, and they decide they want to take on their first foster child. You know how they say hurt people hurt people? All right. In 2004, mid-20s, these young women, they take on a 15-year-old foster child, a young, beautiful girl that interviews would refer to as Lee. Lee interviewed later in life, and she would come out and say that she thought everything was pretty grand out the gate. At first, they did traveling, they did camping, different activities together. They were kind of like the three amigos. She really felt included. She was safe. She was asked straight up, do you have a problem going to two women that are together? You know, gay. And Lee was so accepting. She's like, no. And what happens is everything goes from really good and it starts to shift, all right? I feel we're talking about a cycle here. I can't diagnose, but stay with me. Shifts. And suddenly things aren't so great anymore. We're kind of going from this really light white area of life where there's an understanding that she's loved and supported, this young woman, into a gray area where she feels pretty demeaned. She ends up getting lied about, and the lies would include that she was the kind of young woman that hunted through a trash can for food. Later, she debunks that, and it was said to really hurt her. Of course. What ended up happening was the Harts ended up dropping off this young woman at a therapist's office where she's going in, getting supported to get mental help and clarity in her life. I feel like a lot of foster kids do that, or maybe even need it. She's doing it. That's the right thing, right? Everything's good. They just never came back for her. They never even said goodbye. But the young woman ends up reflecting on a lot of the things that went right and wrong. And she ended up saying she was forced to do a makeover. They took her to a store and they took her to a particular department. They put a bunch of makeup on her and she remembered how that made her feel. It seemed like she felt demeaned because that's not who she wanted to be at all at 15 years old. She was still discovering her life, let alone herself, while these women are forcing her to be a specific way for her age. It was said that the women stood there watching her with their arms crossed, kind of in disapproval because she didn't backflip and seem grateful for the makeover. And the way that I see it, Sara and Jennifer were trying to fix. Red flag, don't try to fix someone in the foster system. Too many foster parents do that. And you know what? It makes the foster child feel broken. That's what you do when something breaks. If you can preserve it, you take it and you fix it. Trust is gone when that happens. And so when a child goes into the foster system, it really is important that you're not coming with the approach of fixing. This is insulting to me when I hear this part of the story, that she felt really demeaned and like they were trying to fix her. The next chapter for Jennifer and Sara would include them taking in 3 siblings from the Texas foster system. Marcus, who was 7, Hannah, who was 4, and Abigail, who was 2. Statistically speaking, the kids fell into several categories that might have made them hard to place with adoptive families. And this is hard for me to say, but what I read was that because they were African American, it's harder to foster or adopt African American children. And it can be more difficult to find families who are willing to take on multiple siblings. And in this case, they were siblings. The first night that the siblings stayed with Jennifer and Sara, the first thing that Jennifer did was exploit their privacy on the internet. She took to Facebook and dramatically explained her first night in mothering the 3. She said Abigail urinated everywhere and gashed her chin falling down the stairs. Hannah had smeared feces on the wall and gorged herself with food so much so that it resulted in multiple episodes of projectile vomiting. Then she goes on to say that Marcus hit his head on a closet wall and in multiple voices had claimed or declared that he was possessed by demons. And though she creates a very messy, uncomfortable environment for the readers on social media, she declares a win. If not us, she said, who? Psychologist and professor Deborah Serrani mentions online through public information that the type of content that guardians and adults share about young children can frame a child's digital identity before the child has even identified who they are in real time. This also calls for prejudgment. It's trade of the child's potential. It shapes their future and trades their actual potential and molds it and builds it online into something that most of the time just really isn't. Oversharing on social media, especially private details, can have profound effects on children. It is said that it actually destroys trust, and I would have to say from experience it sure does, but it compromises the bond as a foster parent or a guardian that you're there to have with the child. In sharing those private moments, you're actually exposing your child and their privacy. Statistically, this leads to children potentially getting bullied earlier in life. There was an article that I found that I really liked from Very Well Mind, where it says that there's 3 really important questions that you should be asking before you take the child's information in life and post it on a public forum. Is it kind? What are you getting out of posting? What's in it for you? What's in it for the child? Not what's in it for your social media followers, not what kind of influencer you're building yourself up to be, but for real, who does it benefit the most? And 3, could this post possibly, even down the road, offend someone in the situation that's being posted about? A follow-up question for self that the article displayed was, am I prepared for backlash and judgment when it comes to the post? So in knowing Jennifer and Sara, the kind of people they were, and the background they came from, really high defense, feeling really unaccepted, running from situations that made them uncomfortable, blocking out anybody from the past that had offended them. Do you guys think, just right here, that Jennifer and Sara were prepared for what they were asking for? Once you open those floodgates to social media and you post publicly, by the way, it becomes everybody's business. And I've even heard that once you post something, it stays on the internet forever. Social media is a form of social interaction. The dangers of it are far too many people are using it as a double life. In closing for that post, Jennifer declared that her and Sara were doing what they thought it took to help heal the children, to make a difference. And they said, if not us, in capital letters, who? So I really feel like we really should know by now that the post was really unnecessary and it came from a very unhealthy place. The problem with the social media friend group or the followers is that if you go like, heart, comment, support that kind of material, whatever the motive is on the other side of the screen in real time, it typically feeds the ego of the person posting, especially when it's this blatant boasting kind of post. Like, I'm the hero, this is what I'm dealing with, but if I don't do it, who else? I guess this is probably the point where Jennifer and Sara felt like, wow, we're really getting a lot of traffic with this kind of attention. We're doing really good. We're accepted. People think we're one of a kind. We have a support system on the internet. So what they did was they put this really lovely picture of the two of them on an adoption agency, declaring that they were actually looking to adopt even more children. With this post, they actually said that they were looking for children 8 and younger, and that they were willing to actually take on any ethnicity, any race of any kind of child, as long as they were young enough. We're ready. And to the agency, they're going to look real good. They're married, they're committed, fostering the hardest kinds of children to foster because of race and because of the sibling aspect. I mean, they looked like they could have been decent people, except they weren't, and we missed the signs. Going all the way back to the 15-year-old, I think that spoke volume on how they were really handling things. Being a foster parent, in my opinion, shouldn't be like trying on a pair of shoes. I'm going to walk a mile in these and see if it works. And if it doesn't, then I'll just drop out. You're actually dealing with real lives. So the women, Sara and Jennifer, decide, you know what, we're taking 3 more. And by the way, I want to mention that, in my opinion, the foster parents and the ones who adopt with actual pure intentions, those are the real heroes. So it insults me furthermore that Jennifer and Sara were using social media to come out about their choices for some kind of spotlight attention. Every foster parent with good intentions is a hero. Every person that adopts somebody outside of their bloodline, a child, a teenager, with good, healthy intentions, those are the heroes. And you know what? The secret in life is that it's not a Disney movie. It's not a Facebook fantasy land. The real heroes don't wear masks and capes and ask for attention. The real heroes aren't looking to do it for any kind of feedback. The real heroes are doing it because this is what they want to do with their life. They want to help people. So this is a red flag. Stop exploiting your foster children or your adopted kids. But in 2008, they ended up taking on 3 more African American siblings. 5-year-old Devontae, his younger sibling Jeremiah, who was 4, and Sierra, who was 3. And of course, there was more exploitation. But as time went on, it seems to me the ball was starting to roll behind closed doors, out of control. There were some big secrets too. In 2008, Hannah, who was 6 years old, showed up to school and she had bruises. When questioned, she told the school that it was her mother, Jennifer, that did it and that she used a belt. When authorities came out to check on the situation, as they should have, Jennifer and Sara actually projected blame back onto Hannah and said, "We were unaware of this. It's probably because she fell down the stairs a few days prior." No criminal charges ended up being filed, and within 2 months after the school had reported Jennifer and Sara pulled the kids out of that school and they re-enrolled them somewhere else. And it's a major failure on the foster care system, because a foster child or a child that's being adopted showing up with bruises? No. In 2009, Priscilla, who was Devontae, Jeremiah, and Sierra's aunt, she ended up fighting for her rights to her nieces and nephews. I'm aware that the foster system, they do place biological family members like first in line to try to place the children as close to the home as possible, because statistically they're supposed to thrive in feeling more a connection with their biological bloodline. The whole goal of going into the system in the first place is to remove the child out of danger. Everybody prays and hopes that the biological guardian will pull it together. They can be on a probationary period and then eventually they can win their family back. That's what was going on. Was Priscilla was trying to get custody of her 3 nieces and nephews. But Jen, of course, reverted into her fantasy land. That's what I'm going to call her Facebook, her fantasy double life. And she went on there and she boasted about how when Jeremiah saw Jennifer when Jennifer went to the CPS Texas Center, he wrapped his arms around Jennifer and he said, "You my mama now." Jennifer felt the need to go onto the internet and actually exploit that personal, private moment between Jeremiah and Jennifer. Like, damn, chick, did anything you do that was good for another not make it to the internet? I can already answer for Jeremiah's behavior. Jeremiah needed love. Jeremiah would have hugged anyone that walked in that room and offered him love. He was hurting. He's scared. He's a child. And I want you to remember this because Jennifer actually ends up going around later and she starts talking about how she thinks Jeremiah is special needs. Jeremiah actually was not special needs. So this is the hero going on the internet saying, "This baby needs me. He called me mom. I'm the one." Also, shout out to marketing manager Isabella of Crime Light Channel. She and I talked about this case and she was saying that Minnesota is actually one of the easiest top places to adopt children. That is so key to know here because Jennifer and Sara were doing whatever it took and taking the easy way to do it in order to gain custody and be able to adopt these kids. Where the system failed was there were alternatives, like Priscilla. She should have had the opportunity to do so. Jennifer and Sara were actually able to successfully adopt the 3 kids. So with the new family, the 6 beautiful African American children, 2 different families come together under the Harts, Sara and Jennifer. Jennifer ran amok with exploiting their lives, with exploiting the next chapter of all 6 children. Festivals, cross-country trips, dressing everybody to look the same so it looks really good in the pictures. Kids singing songs about being so grateful, kind of like worshiping a god. You know how when you go to church and you worship God and you talk about loving the Lord and giving worship? The kids were actually singing songs of praising their situation. They were chanting, "We are so thankful," in Jennifer and Sara's home. Furthermore, we're going to take it next level and we're going to discuss how exploiting suddenly takes Jennifer off a cloud. Because when you put your business out there, at some point or another, you're going to have somebody come along because it's public and they're going to have a different opinion. And the more she exploited her family, Devontae in specific, the more hate she would start to receive and the more unhinged she started to be. Once at a beloved music festival in the coastal woods, 12-year-old Devontae stole the show when he was crying and he hugged the musician after wearing a sign, "Free hugs," and having the word love buzzed on the back of his head. Once people saw the sincerity behind Devontae, they took to the master, Jennifer, as the poster child for everything that went right in the photo. They credited her, the likes for her racked up, the attention on her page just up, 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 up. She started to receive a lot of attention for her good works. I'd like to wedge in another fact that in all my entire life of growing up in the foster system, there was one time that I asked for my photo to be taken. I never asked for photos, but someone built me an album when I was a foster child. To be honest, I actually don't have the album anymore, and I really haven't even thought twice about it until like this moment when we're talking about children, trauma, moving, pictures, exposure. You know, I don't recall that being a desire of mine like whatsoever. But what does matter is what's outside of the photos that were in that album. What matters is the fact that I remember what it was like living in real time. And in real time, there were real issues. Being a foster child was really hard. The trauma that went unnoticed in my childhood is something that carried over in my adulthood, to which I may not remember photos that were taken of me, and I may not have very many of those, and I'm glad that I don't, because what I do remember is the good and the bad, and the trauma is something that I actually have to live with all the time. I'll hit on more of that in the end of the video, but I wanted to say that because I'm sure for Devontae, that photo, that every festival goer that said they loved him and he just seemed so sweet and oh my God, look at this, I feel sorry for him because I really think for him that was a private moment. But even a friend of Sara and Jennifer by the name of Ian, he says that he knew that Jennifer was using the exploiting card for attention on herself. He said that he feels the narrative all along was that Jennifer wanted to be seen and noticed, to be awesome for the good works of the children. But the worst part about that, what I just said, what Ian, their friend, was saying, what the social media was starting to look like, the pride that Jennifer felt in all of her posts about what a good, glorious hero she was. The worst part is, in my heart, I don't really think that Jennifer and Sara had a heart to love these kids the way they deserved. I don't think that they adopted and fostered for the right reasons. I think there was a serious void going on with these two unhealed women that looked good from the outside, but were really hurting and unhealed on the inside. And that just makes everything worse, because therein lies the double life. An anonymous tipster to the Oregon Department of Human Services said back in 2013 that the kids pose and are made to look like one big happy family, but after the photo event, they go back to looking lifeless. This was a claim made 5 years before the 6 children would be murdered. People were starting to pick up on this sooner than Jen thought. On the outside, beautiful life. On the inside, secrets. Out in Minnesota, in November of 2010, 6-year-old Abigail ended up complaining to the school that she had owies. And I want to mention that this seems to be a pattern. The first individual that they were targeting that the report was on was Hannah. Remember? They said that Hannah was 6 and she fell down the stairs and that they didn't do anything because Hannah went and said she was getting messed up with a belt. Well, now you have 6-year-old Abigail. Both young girls, both African American, and both 6 years old. Yes, that matters. That's a pattern. That's the kind of young child that these women would continue to target. And usually, from my experience as well, what happens is when they favorite, because there is a favorite, when they favorite, it's opposite than what they're targeting. And I know from my personal experience and memory of being a foster child, the younger girls were really easy targets for the female foster parents. So just remember that, because there's going to be someone that they favorite in this story, and then there's the 2 young 6-year-old girls that seem like they're getting physically hurt. Now, there were absolutely plenty of signs this time. If not last time, this time there was enough. The kids were investigated and questioned, and they were blatantly honest. They're like, yep, we're starving. Abigail said that she was messed up physically by, she said, I think Jennifer. But ironically, the shy one, Sara, was the one that ended up saying, you know what, it was me. And if I were to guess, like just guessing here, I would say that they were probably looking out for one another because Jennifer had already been complained about before. And so if you get a pattern going with the same kind of kid in the same kind of environment, 6-year-old, African-American, female, complaining at school about this person, if this one person continues to be looked at, then it's a pattern. And so I personally don't think Sara did it, but Sara stood up and she goes, yeah, you know, it was me. The kids admitted in school that they were hungry. And you know what the women did? They did the same damn thing they did with Hannah. They did it with Abigail too. They projected, they lied. They said these kids had eating disorders and that the school system just didn't understand. What do you mean? If the child has an eating disorder, they're not going to go to school and say they're hungry. If they're hungry, they're hungry. They're telling you. They have a voice box and a soul. They're saying what they need and they're telling you what they're not getting. In my life, the school system actually kind of sucked. I don't really feel like they did a whole lot for me, but that's another story for another time. In this story, it seems like the school system they were on it. It was always the system that was screwing up, the investigations that were going on, and the CPS cases that were getting closed. In 2011, Sara would be convicted of misdemeanor domestic assault and sentenced to a year of community service and probation. But 2 days prior to that, Sara and Jennifer pulled the kids out of school, and the kids never went back. What the hell is that? Slap on the hand and go clean up some trash? Get watched a little bit? Yeah, Sara is the quiet one. In a way, they were smart if they were lying about this. And the signs were all there. What CPS did was come by the act, listen to their words, ignore the children's voices. They slapped Sara on the hand, watched Miss Quiet over there keep quiet and keep in line for a year, and probably assigned her picking up some garbage. Failure on the system. The Harts never put the kids back in school, and they never registered the kids to be homeschooled either. So now we have a real problem, because this should have been the time where investigators really homed in on that. And I have to say, this is where I really think systems all the way around really screw up pretty bad. And this is one of the reasons why I missed 2 years of school growing up, and it went pretty unnoticed. We'll get into that later. Finally, by 2013, there were 2 whistleblowers. One of the whistleblowers was the one that came out and said, what Jennifer does is she lines the kids up, she forces them to smile, she's aggressive about it, and then after the photo's done, they go back and they look like robots. And that's exactly what the person said. They said the children are like trained robots, and they are scared to death of Jennifer. The other whistleblower would end up saying that Jennifer was really mean when it came to food. She enjoyed holding food hostage over these kids. She would lie about them being skinny and malnourished, which is so damn insulting because she was not thin, okay? She definitely didn't mind putting a fork in her mouth, but she would give the kids a very minimal amount of food. And if they overate, then they would get punished. And the punishments were really mean. She would make them wear masks and go sit on an air mattress for up to 5 hours. Now, I did mention this when it came to Hannah and Abigail being the 6-year-old baby girl targets. There was a favorite. The favorite was Devontae. If anyone were to get special kind of attention, it was Devontae. Devontae had a very extroverted, loving, generous energy about him, and he was the one, in my opinion, in Jen's eyes, that was making the family look real good with the way that he was emotional right on time, the way the camera clicked on him, the way the photo went viral of him and the musician. But for the rest of the kids, it was boot camp. If they laughed too loud, they were in trouble. And they were allegedly not allowed to cry. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Not based off of Jennifer's Facebook, something within her control. You see, under her control with social media, she could control what you thought, what you felt, and what you assumed to be happiness and a healthy environment with this family. But in reality, she controlled very differently. She was dark with her control. Minnesota Child Protective Services would come out in 2013 on that report, and they would say, you know what the biggest problem with these women were? They looked normal. That's not an excuse. It's just not. The system failed. And what Jennifer was doing, in my opinion, was she was grooming her favorite. Because in August, this is when CPS came out, and Devontae changed momentum this time. Remember the last time all the kids were like really honest, like we're not fed, yeah, she's mean. Well, Devontae took the lead this time. And he said that Jennifer and Sara were really good to the kids. And what's sad is it's not Devontae's fault that he was lying. And unfortunately, he was being groomed to live a double life really young too. But he was only doing what he was told to do. And if you really can see his spirit, you're gonna know he doesn't want to disappoint, and he actually is really kind, and he probably did love with everything in him. And so it was in his heart to create peace. That was Devontae. To me, I think Jen favorited him because that's an easy, vulnerable kind of person that you can shape, mold, and say, stand, and they're gonna jump. Walk, they're gonna run. They don't want to disappoint you because they're empaths. Jennifer and Sara would furthermore target Abigail, the 6-year-old. They were already getting physical with her, as we know. But now they were telling authorities she's mentally handicapped. I'm not going to say the word that they said. And regarding the big boastful post about the little boy at the CPS Texas Center, when he wrapped his arms around Jen and he goes, "You're my mama now." And she went and boasted about that. You know what they had to say about him? They called him globally delayed and said that they even thought he was autistic. Now I really have questions. I'm an autism mom. Where is Jennifer finding the time for the double life if she's supposed to be loving these kids in real time? Now she's furthermore buried herself. She's like, yeah, I think I have 2 special needs children in the home. This actually adds against her case because foster kids in general need extra. And that should be the assignment. Maybe people just need to stay off social media when they give foster care, and they need to focus on giving extra care instead. Because foster kids need extra attention, extra time, extra love, extra trust. They need safety. And now you're throwing in special needs on top of that? Where did she find the time? And the worst part is, again, it blows my mind. CPS isn't picking up on this. She goes and she tells authorities, you know what? I'm really nice. And actually what I do is this is my heart. I make the children meditate for 5 minutes. That's my punishment. You're gonna tell me that you have 2 special needs kids sitting there for 5 minutes at a time? Sometimes 30 seconds to a minute is a really long time to get through a hard moment with an autistic child. Speaking from experience, my son would never sit there and meditate for 5 minutes. He would go into a full meltdown. So that was a lie. I feel like this would have been a good time for CPS to start asking for some proof here, because it's going to further surprise you that actually none of this was true at all. But if it had been true and I was a CPS caseworker, I would have totally caught on to that and been like questioning that up and down. What do you mean? Can you show me? Let's do it. Can you go have so-and-so sit? Is this something that, we can go over? I would have been putting that in my reports, the whole 9 yards. It wasn't like, oh, wow, you really are pretty cool. Case closed. Oh, CPS. Like, honestly, man, there were so many red flags. They should have never closed it. They should have kept going on and on and on, because that's how abuse works. That's how it works. It goes on and on and on until somebody puts a stop to it. Their stories weren't adding up. The kids were saying they were hungry, they were getting harmed. There were so many red flags. But per usual, Jennifer and Sara continued to exploit their lives and utilize this for more attention. 12-year-old Devontae would come into national spotlight when he was photographed crying as he embraced a police officer during a 2014 protest in Portland, Oregon. This became a worldwide image known as the hug felt. Devontae was put in the spotlight and given a lot of attention for this particular photo at a really young age. And his response to an interview was that, you know what, this is my way of showing peace. This is my way of unity, giving a hug. But a photographer was actually there that day. And he's like, you know what, I saw this go down and it wasn't like that. This is not the way that it seems. And he came out and he admitted that Devontae was actually terrified of being put in that situation at the protest, and that it seemed like he was crying out of fear with his current guardian, probably most likely Jen, and that he felt like this was played for national attention and that Jen ran with it. She was like, okay, bingo, using her favorite, climbing up. Now it's not just the music festival hugs anymore. Now we're in the streets. She's baiting her son to get her point across on what she wants people to think she believes for attention. And she's wanting positive attention, as we know, because in real time, she's a really negative, mean person, but on Facebook, she's a hero. The problem is that, especially when it comes to politics, you put a child out there and you start getting political, it wasn't pretty anymore. Jennifer was said to start unraveling at this point. She starts getting death threats. She starts getting targeted. Worse, Devontae gets targeted. They start calling him really bad names. Well, guess who took it personal? Jennifer. For who? Jennifer, of course. Why? Because she's got to come off a cloud now. Now, the reality of what's really going on in the world and the fact that you're not that great is going to bleed into social media. And when social media, the double life, wasn't the safe place for her to run and hide anymore, it became reality against reality. None of it was working out for Jennifer. Sara ended up telling a coworker that Jennifer's stress levels were through the roof. And so Jennifer does what Jennifer does. 2016, Jennifer disappears off of social media. She runs from the situation of her pain. She gets off social media for, 6 months, and then by 2017, she comes back. She says they've relocated. Now they're in Washington, and that she was going to allow herself to associate with people that she trusted when the time was right. Jennifer and Sara would relocate next to some neighbors by the name of Bruce and Dana. Bruce and Dana were completely alarmed and startled and super afraid of their neighbor's situation with 6 kids when one early morning, 1:30 a.m., it's pitch dark. They hear banging on the door. They open the door and remember Hannah? She was the first 6-year-old target. It's her. The first thing she says is, "Hide me." She runs past Bruce. She runs into a room and she starts telling Dana and Bruce that they are being mistreated severely and actually that the differences in the race were being utilized against the children. I can't say it here. It starts with an R. But the kids felt that their parents were against their kind. So she was declaring that her parents didn't love them, that they were actually against them because they were African American. And then she declares that they were getting physically attacked. Now, later on, Jen would end up banging on the door as well, and it was said that she didn't really even take time to introduce herself or seem calm. She actually seemed like she was pretty upset and aggressive and walked past into Dana and Bruce's home to retrieve her daughter. Jen did what Jen does. She projected onto Hannah and blamed a new medication that Hannah was taking for insomnia. Before you know it, Jen had spent a few minutes calming Hannah down, which I don't really think that happened when they were in private. I think she was getting the good old ear pinch, like, you're gonna go out there and do what I say. Hannah comes out and she's like, "I am so sorry." And actually she's referring to Jen as ma'am, not even mom. So Jen's like, "Hey, tell them what we talked about." And Hannah's like frightened. She says, "Yes, ma'am. I'm really sorry I disturbed your peace." She says that to Dana and Bruce. Jen says, "Tell them you had a bad week, sweetie." Hannah said, "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry." By 6:30 a.m. that very next morning, which, I mean, this all happened at 1:30, so 6:30. I mean, that's not a lot of sleep. Again, another red flag. And Dana knew that. She was ready to call CPS. She's like, these people are weird, but the kids seem scared. 6:30 a.m., the whole family just shows on up to the doorstep of Bruce and Dana. Hannah was forced to hand Bruce and Dana a note with a private apology. This is when Jennifer starts blatantly lying again about all the kids. She ends up telling Dana and Bruce that these were substance children and that Hannah had a diagnosis of bipolar. Jennifer persisted to lie and try to convince Dana that, hey, the reason why we're even here in Washington as your neighbor in the first place is because we have this dream to farm. Like, we want all these animals. We want the kids to feel like they can be themselves. I mean, look at these guys, bipolar, mental. Oh my God, they've had it so hard. Substance babies. I mean, painting herself to be the hero. Well, Dana wasn't buying it. And it seems to me that in studying the conversation, that Dana was kind of questioning Jen. So Dana's hearing this woman, Jennifer, talk about, I'm basically isolating my kids and we homeschool them. First question Dana asked, why? And I really don't think Jen saw that coming. I'm gonna put what she said right here because I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. I think this is super rude. And I think it shows a lot about Jennifer's character on her motive. Like, why are you really doing what you're doing? And that was Jen's response. Hannah ended up handing over the letter to Dana and Bruce. And the first thing they said was the letter did not seem legitimately written by a child. 2 months later, Dana's father got involved because he knew that it was actually causing chaos for Dana and Bruce. Like, they could not sleep the same and they were unsettled after everything had happened. They were constantly looking over the fence. Dana was said to walk up and down the driveway and just check on the kids. She said that it was really weird that she knew like Jen was lying about the whole we're farmers thing because the shades were always drawn in the home and the kids were not outside farming and playing with farm animals. What ended up happening next is just like earth shattering. Devontae, I've already declared, had a heart of gold. He never wanted to disappoint Jennifer. He was in line, he would be outside doing yard work, and soon enough, Devontae and Bruce ended up building a bond. Devontae would go to Bruce and he would start opening up, and he told Bruce straight up, you know what? They are mean. Hannah was beat Abigail has been hurt. We are mistreated. We're starving to death over there. Bruce ended up asking about the little green note that Hannah had written, and Devontae said, yeah, that totally wasn't written by her. No way, man. That was totally Jen's grooming. That was Jen. Jennifer told her what to say, and she did it because she wanted to look good. From that point forward, they were giving a secret box by the fence to Devontae that would contain, food bars and non-perishable items so the kids could have a snack so they could eat and they could start building trust with someone in their lives. And I just think it's so amazing that Devontae did that for his siblings. Like I said from the start, he had a heart of gold. Dana was the one that was trying to get more information from Devontae as he would secretly visit so she could build a real case. She really wanted enough evidence to be able to really do the kids justice. It's really scary and harmful for kids or even battered women if authorities get involved and they do a welfare check on someone and then they end up walking away trusting that it's safe enough to close the case. There's actually a lot of DV situations that happen in the aftermath. And I mean, these kids were going to get punished. And Dana knew that because this is what Devontae was telling her. There was another visit from CPS where they tried to get in touch with someone, but this time nobody answered. And so CPS left a card on the door. Oh my God. Just, the kids in the house, very dangerous. There were a few more separate occasions that CPS came out and tried really hard to catch Jen and Sara, but they weren't able to. Then randomly, the family packed up and they left. Dana said she knew that they were on the run, but she didn't know what was next. Next thing you know, Sara calls out of work. That was really not typical of Sara. So Jen, the kids, and Sara, they're gone. Nobody really knows where yet. But March 26th of 2018, it was described as overlooking the bluff out here in California, where if you looked down, you would see a very crumpled vehicle upside down that had crashed, rocking against the rocks through the waves. Jennifer had been intoxicated. She had been driving, and when she was found, she was so messed up from the accident, they could not even identify her. She was unrecognizable, it was said. Sara was in the passenger seat. Sara was also banged up to the point of being unrecognized. This was all Jen's doing. This is the woman that said she had a good life and she was a hero. She did this. The hero did this. Jennifer got herself drunk. While maybe she initiated it or Sara did it, but Sara sedated herself and allegedly the 6 kids, and they committed familicide. And even though Jen was always the ballsy one that took matters into her own hands, Sara was definitely behind it because Sara had researched different ways of dying. She looked up the effects of drowning. She looked up her sedatives for her and the kids, and then she was looking at placements for the 2 dogs in the family home. Devontae sadly was never recovered. Even in 2023, they never recovered Devontae. But the accident was so bad. I can't get into details, but they know that he was in the vehicle and that he perished, and it's just sad we could never recover Devontae. After that, investigators would end up finding out about the big double life that the Harts were living. They fine-tooth combed the Harts' life and searched high and low in the home. There was a lot of different weird facts about it. I'm going to leave a link down below because I want to stay on point here about the exploitation of the children before they were killed. But it was definitely a double life, and it caught a lot of different people by surprise. And of course, America was angry. They knew of this family because Jennifer always posted about it, and also because of the infamous free hugs photo of Devontae. But friends couldn't understand. In fact, a musician that was close to the family by the name of Zippy ends up reminiscing about the kind of people that Sara and Jennifer really were, stating they were awesome people and that the world needs more people like Sara and Jennifer. Zippy, you're upsetting me. But I'm relieved to say that a lot of the nation and the media saw this differently than that of the opinion of Zippy's. They saw that Sara was an enabler, and a lot of people declared that they felt like Jen was a narcissist. Furthermore, even more details would come out about the false identity that Jennifer and Sara were portraying for the Hart family, such as there was a picture with children and their paintings, but the brushes actually didn't have any paint on them. Looking back, some of their friends would actually say, you know what? It is blatantly obvious that these women were constantly on the run. They had a high defense system and that they just really didn't let anyone close to them or let people in. And all of the lies that the two women were suggesting of the children, that they had eating disorders, they were substance babies, or all those things, those all came into light too. They were mostly perfectly healthy, except for what Jennifer and Sara were actually doing to them at the time. I don't want to leave out the fact that Jeremiah was said to be a substance baby, but I don't think that needs to define who he was. And yet, that is a really big deal because, later in his life that could have affected him in different ways of its own. But it doesn't mean that they had the right to exploit that information and use it to their advantage every time they were questioned by authorities. That was the wrong thing to do. They didn't embrace it and work with it. They utilized it as a weapon to declare that Jeremiah was not normal, and that's not fair. So I do want to honor that. Jeremiah, you're an angel. You deserved better, and so did the rest of all the kids. Hannah Scott is a criminology professor, and she indicated that it's really important for people that are abusing to manage a public identity, because when victims come out and say, you know what, I'm being abused, it's a lot harder to believe the victim. It does tend to look like they are crying wolf. She co-authored the only known study on female family annihilators, or people who kill multiple members of their family. Sometimes, she said, the motive can be around loyalty. If a female offender is suicidal, she believes she cannot leave the children behind because there are no caretakers after she's gone. Really important. Statistically, men are known to be the ones who commit familicide. But this is a really prime example that women do commit familicide, and that women who do it are said to be statistically mentally unstable or have a mental health condition of some sort. Me, well, against all odds, here's what I think. I think that Jennifer selfishly took her family out of this world because I fear that her fear was if she didn't take the kids with her, that the world would actually have been a better place if they had stayed behind without her. I think that Jennifer was terrified of leaving this world and the children in it and having her name smeared. I think Jennifer went out the way that she wanted to be seen, as the loyal, good, heroic foster mom that adopted multiple children. And I think she wanted it to start and end that way. I think she was scared of her reputation to be left in this world as having no meaning at all. I think she constantly feared that from the earlier days before they would ever even foster. Do I matter? I don't know, because I'm gay. I'm defensive. I don't feel like I matter. I don't feel like I'm accepted. I'm going to run away from that feeling and do what I want anyway. If I take on a Caucasian teenager that I actually can't do my job with, I'm gonna dump her on the side of the road and I'm gonna run and I'm gonna do what I want anyway. So I need to make sure that I take on African American children to look even better. I need to have a purpose in my life. For me, I need to stand out. And for a long time, Jennifer took the Hart story and she ran with that like crazy. People to this day still think it was real. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe they would do this because they were such good people. Just look. Well, I agree. Just look. Look at the false advertising. The thing is, what I truly believe is that statistics all day long, right? Like all over the internet, whatever. Suicidal women want to take their families out for caregiving. Okay, and I honor the fact that a criminology professor would declare that. I'm not going to go against it. But all I'm going to say is from experience, you ought to stand in a room with a woman like Jennifer, because I have stood in many rooms with many different people, both men and women, like Jennifer and like Chris Watts. I've been in those situations with that energy many times in my childhood. The whole social media exploitation of your life, the harder someone goes with that, the more into it ought to be looked into. It ought to be looked at. I really don't think Jennifer and Sara had good intentions with fostering and adopting. The system had a job to do to protect these children. Jennifer and Sara had a job to do to protect these children, and everybody failed these children. And because of the failure in the system, this happened to these children. In closing, I'll share with you a little bit about my personal experience in being exploited myself. Before I get into it, I would like to thank God for putting me into the home of the family that ended up adopting me. Even though it didn't end up being my happy ending, it definitely had its benefits due to the fact that the alternative was to end up on the streets utilizing substances, as my entire biological family to this day still do, minus one person. They've all been to prison. But I'm going to tell you some truth here. In the home that adopted me, this did not turn out to be a very healthy environment for me to be raised in, unfortunately. I was put into foster care from 2 years old to 6 years old, and then I was put back with my biological mother from 6 years old to about 8 years old, where I lived on the streets and I saw way too much. And then I was put back into foster care at 8 years old. And within 3 years or so, I ended up becoming adopted. When I joined my adopted family, at first everything seemed really great. We even went as far as to go on these really big trips to Disneyland. My adopted family gave me a really beautiful room, and they gave me horses to ride and to train. It really did seem like it was the way that it was supposed to be. Well, between 6 years old and 8 years old, I missed 2 full school years. I suffered academically pretty bad to the point where it actually affects me to this day. I hate bookwork. I am literally terrible with tests. My drive to survive and help people has always driven me to the top of almost everything in my adulthood to excel. But once I'm at the top, it takes a lot of brain power to manage and maintain. And that is something that unfortunately I would always end up having to walk away from it because I literally struggle with the way that I think. I've been diagnosed with ADHD for it. I have what I call a learning curve from missing so much school. The exploiting of my life started at the adoption process. Now, like I said before that, I had an album built from one of my foster families of all the different pictures of me being in the system. I don't have it anymore. I don't think that was exploiting. I think that was just sort of here you go. This was a chapter in your life. But in this case, when I was adopted, I was originally asked, do you want to be adopted, or do you want to wait around for your biological mother and see how she's doing? I remember my response was that I was really scared to leave my mother. I wanted to see if she could pick herself up and give herself a chance at life to raise me and love me the way that I believed that she could. Anyway, they ended up adopting me out to the family, and I remember that particular day I was pretty confused. And there are pictures of the adoption, which are honorable things for the adopted family to have, but at the time, those pictures, I felt like I had to act happy when I was just sincerely confused. By the time I hit 3rd grade, I had been put back into school, exactly the grade level that I was supposed to be at for my age, even though I had been on the streets, traumatized, some bad things happened to me during that time that I don't want to come out about here right now. But in this case, I ended up earning within 3rd grade a award that was designed specifically for me, and it was literally an award called Most Improved Student. I remember my adopted mom taking a lot of pictures of that day. I had no idea in 3rd grade that I was getting that award, and I remember that this made my adopted mom beam, feel proud, and she was the only one up in front of the whole school just snapping a bunch of pictures. Smile, smile. I was really ashamed. ashamed. I was totally embarrassed because I felt stupid. That award actually did not honor me. It honored my adopted mom for putting clothes on my back, putting me in school. And I remember feeling like I am so stupid that I can't even earn an award that a lot of other students can, that other normal people get. They had to actually design one for me. To go from a kid that didn't get fed for a long time on the streets, fending for self, being kicked to the corner, ignored, put into different homes, put one of those kids that was just lower level or stupid or deemed just antisocial. Now I'm suddenly in front of a whole assembly of all these students trying to get my life in balance, make new friends, and I have a camera in my face with an award saying I did something that these other kids didn't do, but it made me feel like I had a disability or something. It wasn't a good feeling for me. And looking back, I don't appreciate the memory at all. I don't appreciate being exploited and embarrassed like that at that age or that time in my life. I would be, I'm sorry to say it, but pretty much forced into riding horses because that is something that my mother, who was adopting me, her biological daughters really enjoyed growing up. And that was something that my adopted mother really liked as well. And so it was never even an option. Like I asked, can I do dance? Can I try all these other things? And I was pretty much told no. But what I was allowed to do was go horseback riding and train with horses and hang out with horse people all the time. Well, that was not actually healthy for me at all. For some, that could be really good, like therapy. But for me, I was pushed into competitions. I was kind of shoved to win. I just didn't cope very well. It actually made me really anxious. That pissed my horse trainer off, which was a really good friend of my adopted mom's. She didn't like that I wasn't winning. She didn't like that I was nervous all the time. I was really timid. Actually, I was constantly punished if I was laughing or trying to make friends when I was horseback riding because the horse trainer wanted me to come take horses really seriously. And so I was blamed a lot for my horse being really hyper or really just, knocking over barrels or whatever they were doing, when I was competing in the course. I honestly remember that whole time, I just wanted to make friends. I just wanted to find myself, but I wasn't allowed to do it outside of horses. There are so many different pictures of me competing, riding horses, just doing a lot of different horse events. And I honestly leave those pictures in a very dark place in my home because I hate that chapter of my life. That was like 9 or 10 years of my life. I remember terrible things about the experience. In fact, every now and again, sometimes my old horse friends will come over, message me, on one of the socials, and they tell me, they remember riding horses and it was really fun with me and they really miss those days. I don't know how to tell them, but I really don't want them talking to me about those days. I really don't want to remember being forced into something that I wasn't good at, that made me very nervous, and I was being punished and pushed to be as antisocial as possible. I made a newspaper one time for barrel racing on horses, and every time I look at that, I hate it because I remember I didn't win, and I also ended up knocking over a barrel, but the picture was pretty badass, and so they put it in the newspaper, and I have that clip, but it's not something that I really like. I felt like I was being represented as someone cool and winning, and really within myself as the years grew, I didn't actually feel like I was cool or winning. I felt like it was actually calling to my attention that I was more a loser than anything. The truth of my childhood, without exposing too much pain or disrespecting my adopted parents too much, is the fact that really what you had was you had two old grouchy people that took on two kids to adopt. I was one, and then they adopted another younger boy. About every picture that I look at back in those days, I feel very trapped. I don't like looking back on the memories with this family in particular because there were a lot of pictures taken through the years. And the truth is, the home was just really terribly toxic, really emotionally abusive. On occasion, it secretly was physical as well. Someone within the family once came forward when I grew up, actually just a few years back, and they acknowledged what they saw. I know that meant a lot to me. It really sticks with me. I don't even think that person understands what it meant to me to come forward and say that they witnessed a lot of really crappy things happen to me, especially as a targeted adopted child that came from foster care, because it was bad. Like, I moved out of my adopted family's house by the time I was 17. The worst part for me is remembering that my adopted family actually made headlines out here on the Central Coast for being the foster family of the year. They actually got acknowledged and interviewed through news stations about their progress with foster children through the years, and they beamed and boasted about adopting me and my brother. I actually was not even called to be a part of that family function where the newscast came out, all the siblings showed up together, and they took a really big family portrait, the whole family, the adopted brother, the biological siblings to the parents that adopted me, all their biological grandkids. They didn't even call me. Actually, the camera zoomed in on a picture of me graduating high school where I was, had my hat, my graduating hat, and I'm holding my adopted parents. I ended up framing that picture for them and asking them to hang it in their home because I was so proud of graduating high school through homeschooling myself in a program and getting myself straight A's out of high school while I started working by 13 and having to move out by 16 after having been a foster child and seeing some streets. The news crew came out to my family's home and they zoomed on that framed picture and myself pulling myself through high school to graduate, whatever it took, so I wouldn't be held back or drop out. And they took that, something I did, and I remember it completely hurt me, that they made the news and they used me in a photo without even acknowledging me or inviting me to be a part of that event to say that they adopted me and they helped me graduate high school. It was, it's tough. So, being exploited and lied about and taking credit for is about the shittiest thing that you can do to someone that's been through the foster system and adoption. I feel like the best advice I can give is just allowing somebody to really truly discover themselves through the process of healing. That's really the best thing that a foster family or an adopted family can do for someone that's been put through that kind of hell at a young age. And so this story in particular rings very dear to my heart, and I'm so sorry for all 6 children that lost their lives. This is just a tragedy, a true tragedy where the system failed and the lies and the exploitation of the children were believed. It should have been looked into. And so in this video, we close with honoring the victims of this case. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I appreciate your time. I know it was a long one, but I'm hoping that there was a really powerful takeaway for you. If you ever need anything or have questions about adoption, foster systems, more about what I went through, because, hey, this story wasn't about me, but I'm glad that I could give you a fresh perspective from somebody that went through very similar things. Just let me know. Let me know in the comments. And also I have the email in the Crime Light channel link. Have a blessed week, you guys. And I will be seeing you next week for another case. I'm Chelsea J. Crime Light out.
This is my